gatherings and what have you, which is key to our town. So apologies for the slight delay. But first of all, let me welcome you to tonight's AFRA Neighbourhood Plan Committee, Monday the 18th of October. We have got quite a full agenda and perhaps a challenging agenda, which I think is useful to do that. And we've got some guests joining us, so touch wood and through Councillor Leslie's wizardry, hopefully we'll have someone from the Town Council Planning Association join us for one of the agenda items, which we said we do. Hello, Julia, are you there?
Hello, Ed. Yes, I am here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you from London and nil point for Luxembourg. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us, Julia. Really appreciate this. And if you just bear with us before we get to your agenda item, we'll just go through some prelims and also an update from Home England, and then we'll come to your agenda item if that's okay.
Great, that's fine, thanks.
So, first of all, apologies for absence. So I've had one from Andy Westby. Unfortunately, he's not feeling too good. Not COVID, but not feeling too bright. No one else. Okay, thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. I'll take those bits together. No. Okay. Public participation. I've had one email today I'll go through, but I think our members of the community have kindly joined us here this evening, and thank you. And those that are watching at home, again, thank you very much for taking up the time. But colleagues, yes, please, Peter.
My name is Peter Wenham. I'm here representing some residents of Attleborough. I'm a resident myself. Homes England on the 23rd of September held a display on the green. People felt that this was a good idea, but they felt it was at the wrong time, that it should be done either at the evening or at a weekend, where more people could get involved. They asked us to fill in forms. I done it online. Nobody's heard anything back from them. You know, just acknowledgement, just to say, you know, Homes England will be, you know, communicating through the town council or the ANP. And some people feel a little bit sort of, you know, upset about that. I personally feel that a dummy event or Saturday of that in the town hall here with display boards, and that I know there's one or two people say we shouldn't bother with that, just get on with it. But I feel a lot of people have either left the town and that there's new people moved in and they don't know what's going on. The communication's been fairly poor in some places. Yeah, it's on social media. Not everyone's on social media. There isn't enough in the newspapers, the EP, the Mercury. A large number of people don't get it. So I haven't had it for nearly 11 years, which, you know, I don't know why, because it should be, you know, for all residents. For the, what I think for the Have a Saturday one is to have all steering groups involved, have display boards and explain to everybody, publicise it well in advance, so everybody, you know, has a chance. Because as people come in and talk about, you know, Linear Park, and they say, where's that, or where's that going? And they've got no idea. They've not heard anything about it. Of course, Linear Park is a park that's longer than it is wide, but a lot of people don't know that. They think it's a big open space, and that. On open spaces, I'll try to be very brief. London Road, the recreation ground and games. London Road, the local residents there are feeling that's going to be used more for sports, like football and cricket, and they want it more family orientated for families and with smaller children. That There was a woman there a couple of weeks ago. She had 2 little children wanted to kick a ball about. She was told not to allow it where the swings don't work, so she went round to the other area and she found she couldn't because there were older lads, nothing against them, were playing, and she was afraid that one of the youngsters would get injured. These young people that do play football and that often go down to the rec or gamers. They're always on their bikes around. So, could that be more designated as a family area? Also, there's planning to alter all these sites, and nobody has got any idea what the plan is unless they go onto the town council website. One resident said, "Can't we have notice boards at these, large notice boards showing the plans and giving a consultation period for this?" And when the consultation started and everything's agreed, these notice boards can be used for promoting town, promoting businesses or that. So it's not just to put a notice board in for that. It's something to look forward. But also give plenty of give 3 weeks consultation period of that for the residents. Okay. I noticed briefly on the agenda tonight that the AMP are looking to dissolve and having a 20-minute steering committee. You've got a lot of little committees, none of them are on Zoom, and I take it that there'll be no public participation in these, that they'll be reporting probably directly to the town council itself. Do you feel that this is excluding the public even more, where here, people can come and give their opinion, and if they, email, people do watch online, and those people that watch online do talk to other people as well. Okay. I'll be given a whole list of things, but I don't want to take up any more of the time because there's others that obviously want to.
No, that's
a few
great.
words. So,
If I can quickly respond to those, it's because we're going to catch those up. First of all, Homes England, Joel's here, so we'll give an update in terms of comms and everything else and how things go forward. London Road, Nicola's here on all the work that's been doing on the play part there. Parks, different things. We've discussed in the past about the strategy for parks, and this will come into open spaces. And when Julia comes back online, talk about 20-minute neighbourhood, it's kind of replacing the AMP. The suggestion is it's replacing the AMP, but it follows it through. I think it gives it more teeth, so we're not losing anything. We're trying to, engage it a bit more. Notice boards, funnily enough, Councillor Lane's talked about that earlier in terms of how we get more comms out there, and notice boards is a good use of that. And in terms of the subgroups, that has been the discussion for last month, hence the item on the agenda tonight, because we've tried to set the AMP up in a way that is community-led. It's not quite worked. It's come into a few, let's say, standing order issues, and hence we're on the review at the moment. And you could argue whether we have these subgroups at all. So, but as we go forward, it will be transparent. We do want more community groups involved, and it will be working more as a community. There will be nothing behind closed doors. It will be Zoom and what have you, totally accessible.
Yeah.
So,
can I just say one more thing?
Yeah.
That on the development of like the play areas, now, are you going to keep the neighbours informed?
Yeah.
Even if it's just a leaflet or something, because they do feel left out.
No, absolutely. Communication is key to everything.
Okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Anyone else? Yes, Nigel.
Question on item 8, but obviously we're not there yet.
No.
We have business proceeding plans. Are you actually going to dissolve at the next town council meeting? Is that the result of tonight's meeting, or is that a question mark? Because in the back of my mind, you have things that you're going to discuss and things that are going to be put forward potentially, and then you're going to dissolve. So how do those preceding items get carried forward into any new body?
There will be, if this committee agrees, and
There is an if, that's fine.
it's a committee decision,
Fine.
and it is a council decision. But what I will guarantee, by hook by any means, the community groups that have been heavily involved so far continue to be involved in the proposed new model, and it continues and it thrives a lot better than what it's doing at the moment. So it's not, thank you very much, see it, bye, we're off. It's not, it's, we've tried something, we think there's a better model. This is how it's going to be, it's going to empower you more, I would suggest, and take it forward, and hopefully without the constraints of being that we have to be a subcommittee with standing orders or a committee. But that's part of the discussion with key stakeholders, which TCPA will outline of how it's worked elsewhere and what the benefits are. But you're quite right, it's not, thank you very much.
No, just the concern was that there appear to be agenda items that could have impacts, and
They will do, and they will need to continue, and even as projects for the town council, they will continue anyway. It's not being.
no.
But good point, absolutely. Anyone else? I will just, sorry, Nigel.
Just very quickly on communications, going back to your point and the point that was discussed earlier in the previous meeting about communications and stuff out there for community. I did happen to notice there's something on the 28th, I think, of this month regarding the skateboard park. As a neighbour, I haven't been told. I don't know if I'm supposed to be told, if I'm meant to be involved, if I'm invited down. But no one's sort of bothered. Just on comms and AMP is on there for recreation ground. Of course, it's not just me, there are others.
Okay, point taken. Get back to you on that one.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you. Can I just mention, I got an email today from a member of the community. There were two items. One, in terms of outside Rosecroft School and London Road itself and the crossing points that have been put in. We have a discussion with Highways about some suggestions they have. And we'll pick those up and we'll have that meeting with Highways. I'll pass it on to the town clerk. And the other one again related to London Road and progress and how we're getting on there. And again, I said I'd get back to all the updates. That's the only communication I've had from members of the community. Don't know if anyone else at this stage. I mean, there will be opportunities, and I will put it under any other business now on the market committee to hopefully we can have another opportunity to have a discussion. So if not, if we move on to item 4, which is minutes of the previous committee meeting held on the 20th of September. So all got comments. Yes, absolutely.
I'm not on the AMP, but I was in attendance at that meeting, but I'm not listed on the minutes.
Any other comments? No? Okay, can I have someone to propose that for an accurate record of that meeting? So Councillor Leslie and Secretary Elizabeth. Okay, thank you. Can we have a vote on that, please? Those that can vote. Okay, no, fair enough. Yeah, if you're not here, you can't vote. So, thank you. All right. Okay, moving on to item 5. And Joel, good evening.
Good evening.
So, thank you very much for attending. We'll have a quick update on Homes England and soon. I'll let Joel just to introduce himself to those that have not met him before, but also maybe to Julia as well at TCPA.
Of course, thank you. Good evening, Joel Fayers here representing Homes England to provide what is now becoming the monthly updates to the group. You'd be glad to know that 2 of the points you raised are 2 of my points on the list, so hopefully you'll answer the questions, but if not, please do let me know. I guess it's sort of a quick recap of the event that happened. As we said before, it was very much sort of our first head above the parapet, light touch. It's hard to sort of say hello to a community when there's nothing tangible to put in front of people at that stage. The reason we chose to hold that at the market was very much sort of take it to the people. If people are already sort of gathering in that area, to reach people that way. We did speak to over 100 people on the day, which was a lot better than we had hoped for. So that was very positive from our point of view. And as we sort of pointed out at the last meeting, our intention is to have a reporting back event in November in a more traditional setting with banners indoors at a weekend as well. So that is our next step, really, once we've got something to consult with the community on. So we'll keep you posted on dates with that. We've got a meeting next week just to firm up and get signed off for the next stage of that. So we'll be back in touch. The feedback and the conversation on the day, other than the roller banners blowing over in the wind, which despite a quick trip to the shops to try and pin them down, still get blown over, were actually very, very positive. Obviously, we weren't sure, actually say, people in the community haven't always been here for the whole time from the outline stage, what they remember from it, but on the whole, it was fairly positive, which was good to see. We're still receiving bits of feedback online and in the post. So we've, as I say, we've got a meeting next week where we're reviewing that. So we'll be getting in touch with people because we had quite a few volunteers who wanted to be on our group. So we'll be in touch with those directly as well, just to say hello and sort of talk about next steps with them. There we go. One thing it might be quite good to do if I drop you an email tomorrow is to try and push the photography competition we had on the day. Limited entries on that one, so perhaps if I could drop an email and try and utilise the town council's social media channels for that as well. I'll be able at the next meeting also to be able to give an update on our social media and online presence, and again we can feed in with the comms group locally on how we can make sure that's all plugged in and interconnected there. The other thing that would be quite good to get your input in is sort of, we're now at the stage where we can go out and meet groups and start having those conversations about something actually tangible. So we started drawing up a bit of a short list. We've had a few people who've expressed a wish to meet, but also we sort of identified the local schools, heritage group, the gymnastics group, boxing, football. Who else do you think we should meet with? Who should be on that list? Someone glaringly obvious that we might have missed, who you think would be worthwhile to start bringing on board at this stage as we run up to the next sort of event? Is anyone that sort of comes to mind?
I think what would be useful, first of all, if you send us a list you've got,
Yes.
then we can do a gap analysis.
Perfect.
There's lots of colleagues around here that are in contact with groups and different groups, and Nicholas does a lot of work.
Yeah,
So let us have a look at that gap analysis first of all.
Lovely.
Where there are big gaps that none of us have touched on.
Perfect, thank
I
you.
think that'd be
Yeah,
more efficient.
that sounds great.
Yes, Peter, I'll allow you to.
All right, sorry, I know.
No, that's okay. I've got to be careful what can do and can't do.
Yeah, it'd been an idea to contact the Ashbrook.
Sorry, Peter. Sorry, beg your pardon, I'm just being notified. I need to suspend standing orders.
That's got
If
tone.
you want to propose it, I'll second it.
So
And then
I'll propose
we'll
it.
do hands.
Thank you.
We'll get a show of hands.
Show of hands. Elizabeth?
Am I didn't think I could vote on that?
Okay.
Am I correct?
But it's,
Well, it's in
a bit
principle.
unsure at the minute.
I'm not a member of the town council, so I wouldn't have thought I could
No.
vote on
I don't think you're going to stop it happening anyway. So.
No.
it. No,
I think we've got a majority, Peter, please carry on.
But if we're going to go to
Yeah,
the town
right.
board thing, I better.
Yeah, the Ashbrook
Vicious.
and the Ashbrook Gardening Club. I'm actually chairman of both, and I'm very passionate about open spaces and using native trees, hedges, and that in the planning as well. So yeah,
Perhaps we can have a word afterwards.
yes, certainly.
Thank you.
I've also got the list of 33 different groups on a spreadsheet that you can have, and I think it's really important to have that broad range, isn't it, from not just sports groups, but groups for children, older people. So yeah, there's a list. I have emailed it too.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you.
Michelle looks confused.
I only did it this evening.
Oh, I was going to say, I thought, oh, that's not
I
what
heard the
I'm
meeting
saying.
earlier and thought, yeah.
Good to
I was
Wonderful,
waiting
thank
to
you.
tidy it up, but it's yeah, it's as it is at the moment.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, just bring it back into the meeting. Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
no, it's my fault, and Taylor's absolutely brilliant picking these things up. What I will say, if you don't mind, Joel, and perhaps you want to expand on this, because I know, particularly from Mary, there was a few questions from you, but after that event on 20th of September, was it?
Yeah, let's go back a bit now.
We had a meeting with the designers and the architects afterwards.
Yes.
So again, back to transparency. Going through what the big ticket items were for ASPA in terms of the AMP. So sports provision, indoor, outdoor, the linear park, how that's going to fit into the wider strategy and what have you. So all the big ticket items going through the policy of the AMP, we sat down and went through with yourselves, with people from Homes England, with the architects, designers, and said, these need to be incorporated, and you're now away looking at incorporating those, and you had some conceptual designs, blobs that obviously change over time, but those aspects, particularly the ones you mentioned there, were discussed, they are incorporated, we are looking at positively incorporating those and making them happen, and positively back to 20 minute neighbourhood of how we have that connectivity within the town and make the town, you know, I was going to say special, it sounds awful, but you know, unique, where we want it to be an exemplar and everything else. So it's very positive, and we do thank you for that time and effort, and that will come back, and we'll have this to and fro within reasonable timescales.
Exactly, and I think that's
feedback
where it's also coming to a bit of a head behind the scenes at the moment on the technical bits. There's been a lot of email traffic, so the next update will be bigger updates, I would imagine, and obviously in the interim we'll be in touch about details about the November event once we can confirm that as well for the public.
Yes, Elizabeth.
There's an admission of health and social care, which actually, Joel, I have been in touch with you, haven't I? But I didn't hear me on your list.
You are on my list, don't worry, we'll catch up
I just wanted to
afterwards.
ensure that health and social care is not just primary health care, there's more to healthcare than just.
And we did go into longer living and house design and everything else as well. It's that, as you quite rightly say, it's that wider spectrum. And again, Julia, hopefully, when it will touch on that in the 20 minute neighbourhood of communities for all. Sorry, Tony.
I was just going to say, going forward with the events that you're planning and the kind of consultations with the community groups and obviously organisations, obviously if there is a list that we can transfer, we touched on this in the previous meeting as well, because we're trying to arrange a meeting. Something maybe to consider would be to try and promote it as a, like if you could, as an open consultation for that target audience. So that it's not just inclusive of the people who we have contacts for, but obviously opens the door to any community group that wants or is willing to engage and feed in. So, for instance, I mean, advertise it that it's for that purpose to engage with, not necessarily the wider public, but specifically community groups and organisations. And hopefully any that you don't have on a mailing list will then step forward and approach you. So it's inclusive of everyone.
Yeah, I agree with that. And obviously at the in-person event, we have people suggest groups or where they were members of, and certainly sort of the bit where we're looking for meetings now is start that process. And I think as we go forward, it will sort of do that really and progress. So we'll definitely look to incorporate that as well as an approach.
I think just to add to that, it will evolve. You know, you start from somewhere and you find what works, what doesn't work, and you know, and I think collectively, you know, we're all committed to doing that with Breckenwood as well. So, and I'll just add, we did have a brief meeting with Simon Wood at Breckenwood, which again was positive. We've got a second one with him later this week in terms of mechanics. So it is all starting to come together. But there is that positive relationship, which is key. Is there anyone else that's got a question for Joel whilst he's here? No. We can always come back later, Joel, if someone has a bright idea. But no, thanks very much for that update. I really appreciate you coming all the way up there. Okay, moving on to item 6.
I was just going to say, now that we've got the new system, we can perhaps even put in virtually as
Yeah,
well.
It's a tempting offer, especially as winter's coming.
I did want to mention it, but I thought, no, let's.
When I walked in, I saw a very shiny screen.
So what I'd like to do now, under item 6, I know for a couple of months or so, I've been trying to explain, probably fairly miserably, the concept 20-minute neighbourhood, following on from the work that the Town and Country Planning Association have done and their key stakeholders around the concept of it. And I know it's later on in the agenda item about how we take it forward, if we take it forward. But I did say we'd invite Julia, the director at TCPA, to do a presentation tonight. Julia, if you don't mind, about what is a 20-minute neighbourhood, what's it all about, what the benefits are, and how Attleborough could be involved in it and how to take it forward. So I can kind of pass it over to you. That'd be great. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And thank you so much for inviting me to your meeting. How long would you like me to talk for?
As long as you want. I think, well, let's target 15 minutes and let's just see how it goes. And there's great appetite.
Okay, great. I'm going to try and share my screen with you, so just bear with me for a moment. Apparently the screen sharing has been disabled. Could somebody switch it on, perhaps?
Yeah, we're on it.
All done.
Great, thank you. See if. I share that.
Don't worry.
Can you now see the slides?
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, well, thank you for inviting me to your meeting. My name's Julia Thrift and I'm the Director of Healthier Placemaking at the TCPA, the Town and Country Planning Association. So the TCPA, for those of you who haven't come across it before, is a charity and we work across the UK and sometimes beyond. And what we're trying to achieve, what we'd like to see in the world, are homes, places and communities in which everyone can thrive. And so we try and support places, challenge people, help people create healthy, sustainable and resilient places. And we do all sorts of work, research, trying to influence policy, providing training and guidance. But we're quite a small organisation, there's about 15 members of staff. So around the world, lots of different places are facing very similar challenges. Whether it's in towns or cities, town centres are often clogged with cars. There's just far too many cars, you can't get where you want to go. Walking and cycling in many places are now really unattractive or even dangerous things to do. And lots of urban areas are suffering from air pollution. And we know increasingly how bad that is. Just about 2 weeks ago, the World Health Organization updated its policies on air pollution and said it's a lot worse for people than we'd thought in the past. We're also bombarded with opportunities to buy relatively cheap and really unhealthy food. The green spaces in our towns and cities and villages are not always that good, and very often they're really quite difficult to get to. And a lot of places are not resilient to climate change. They overheat in the summer, they might flood, and we're seeing the problems that that's causing all around the world. So places everywhere are facing these very similar challenges. And during the pandemic, it became really clear how important the places where we live are for our health and well-being. Those two locations are about a quarter of a mile from where I live. And the people who live in the flat above the shop and the people who live in the new flats overlooking the greenery would have had very, very different experiences of the pandemic lockdown and indeed of their daily lives when it's not lockdown. So I think we're all now really aware how important the places where people live and work are to their health and well-being. And over the last 10 years or so, there's been more and more evidence, really solid evidence about the problems that places can cause for people's health, but also evidence about what we need to do to create places where people can thrive and prosper and improve their well-being. So we now have lots of evidence about what we need to do. And with all of these problems, quite common solutions are emerging. And one of them is to reduce the need for people to travel so much by creating places that have most of the things that people need most days nearby. And also encouraging people to walk or cycle rather than drive, by creating places that are compact, they're not really spread out, and that they're connected by pleasant, attractive roads and paths. So this idea of creating complete, compact and connected places is becoming of more and more interest in different places around the world, and is backed up by evidence as well. And one way of describing these places is 20-minute neighbourhoods. They're sometimes also called 15-minute cities or 10-minute neighbourhoods. There's lots of different names, but it's all about creating these complete, compact and connected places. And just over a year ago at the TCPA, we thought, well, how could these places be created in England, given the English planning system and the way that England works? So we decided we would do some research and find out. And we were given encouragement by an awful lot of different organisations from the public sector and the private sector. And we spent some time learning from places that had already been trying to do this to find out what they could tell us. And so in essence, the idea of the 20-minute neighbourhood or 15-minute city or whatever you decide to call it is to create somewhere where people can walk, and within a fairly short walk, they can find the things that they need for their everyday lives. That's not to say that there might sometimes be a need to travel further afield. Of course, sometimes we need to travel further afield. But if most people can find most of the things they need nearby, they're going to bump into their neighbours, they'll get to know people better. Walking is incredibly good for people, so it improves health and it will reduce air pollution and reduce all the traffic in town centres. And so the idea of the 20-minute neighbourhood is to think about what sort of things people need and whether they can find those things nearby. And as I mentioned, places all around the world are thinking about this. So New Zealand, Melbourne, in Australia, in Paris. And so rather than start from scratch, we thought we'd learn from these other places that have been doing this for some time. So we spoke to people in Portland in the USA. They started by wanting to think about how to make Portland respond to climate change, how to not have so much traffic and reduce the amount of carbon that was being used. And they did a very, very careful mapping of Portland to find out which neighbourhoods had all the things that people needed most days and which neighbourhoods didn't. And so that heat map shows the yellow neighbourhoods were really well connected and had the things that people needed, but the cooler colours were places where they weren't so well connected and they didn't really have many of the facilities that people need. So they based this plan on lots and lots of data, very hard facts about what the places were like. And that helped them decide how to prioritise what they were going to do. In Australia, in Melbourne, they started from health problems. They wanted to help people become more active. Because not being active was causing a lot of problems. And the planning team worked with the local Heart Foundation, and they've been trying to implement 20-minute neighbourhoods for about 10 years now. And they have their own plan of how to do this based on what local people need. And in France, the mayor, Anne Hidalgo, came into power saying that she wanted to stop people having to drive from one side of the city to the other. She wanted people to find what they needed in their local area. And it was a really successful policy. And she was voted back in for a second time because people really liked the way it was going. And so that's called the 15-minute city in Paris. So the idea of a 20-minute neighbourhood or 15-minute city is not to impose the same thing on every single place. It's to find out what people in a particular place would like to see, how they would like their place to grow and change, and what things they need nearby. But we're all people, we all have quite common needs, and so we're likely to want the same sort of things. So to a greater or lesser degree, the sort of things we need are good quality homes and affordable homes. To make the 15-minute city or 20-minute neighbourhood idea work, we need really good quality paths and spaces and streets that people feel happy to walk down. Schools are really important, good green spaces that people can get to easily. Local food production is becoming increasingly considered. And it's about keeping jobs and money local, perhaps having fewer chain stores and more local shops so that the money you spend stays local. Places for healthcare and places that work for everybody of different ages, older people, children, teenagers, not just for working people. So those are the sorts of things that people might want in a 20-minute neighbourhood, but every place is different and will have different priorities. So one of the things we looked at and we spoke to the other countries about was, how do you make this happen? And they came up, although Melbourne and Portland and Paris are very, very different places, they actually came up with quite similar things that had worked for them, which I'm going to go through quickly. So there's something about being able to explain this idea. People really get the idea of 20-minute neighbourhoods. And it's really helpful to have someone who can explain it, perhaps a local person who people listen to. And so communicating it well is important. And that's what happened in Paris. The mayor there is very dynamic, and she got people to rally around this idea of improving Paris in this way. So that leadership is important too. And it's great that at the town council you're interested in that idea, because the town council could be a really good place to start for that communication and leadership. But it's also about working with the local community, finding out what people want, working with community groups, talking to different groups of people to find out what they already know, which bits of the town are working, which bits aren't, what needs to be improved. And I mentioned that in Oregon, they've done a lot of research. It's quite important to have facts about things. If you try and change places, people sometimes get upset. Change can be difficult. And you don't want to end up with a slanging match between different groups of people saying, oh, we think this, we think that. You need some facts. And so perhaps doing some research beforehand so that you know what's really happening is really helpful. Partnership and advocacy, you need to work with lots of different groups, with local businesses, as well as local community, perhaps with schools. It's not just the council that would make this happen. And you have to think about inequalities. It's got to be a place that works for everyone, not just for fit and healthy people with lots of money. If you're going to create streets and spaces that work for everyone, are there places to sit down? Does this work for children and elderly people as well? Does it work for people who don't have much money? In terms of making it happen, you can adopt it into policies. So thinking about adopting it into a neighbourhood plan would be one way of doing that. You might need some investment, probably will do. And that might include a member of staff who can help take this project forward. And as well as creating the sort of things that planners create, like streets and homes and things, you also have to encourage people to use them differently. If we're going to get people out of their cars and walking around and cycling, you need to help them make that change. The place where I live recently became a low traffic neighbourhood. And as well as keeping out the big lorries, it's great to see that the schools are teaching the kids to cycle on the road. So that's what I can see out of my window several times a week, is kids doing their cycling lessons. And it's that sort of thing that really helps make it happen. It's not just enough to have the physical infrastructure, you need to support people. And you also need to find out if it's working. And the real test of a 20-minute neighbourhood is this a great place to live? That's what we're trying to achieve here, is a place that people really like living in. And there's a fantastic tool online which you can download called the Place Standard tool. And that's a really good way of talking to people about what they think about their local place, what works for them and what doesn't. And that can help you understand which things aren't working and perhaps need to be changed. And the answers might be different from different groups of people. So the idea of 20-minute neighbourhoods is getting a lot of interest, and it's starting to happen in England. I thought the place you'd be most interested in is Hailsham, because it's a market town and so has similarities with Attleborough. And so in Hailsham, it's become part of their neighbourhood plan. They're describing it as the 10-minute town. That's what worked for them. And Hailsham, like Attleborough, is going to grow. There are going to be more homes, more development, and they want to make sure that as it grows, it becomes a better place, that it's not just full of cars and lacking in the facilities that people need. So they want that growth to be good growth. So you might want to have a look and see what they've done. Having said that, if you go ahead with this in Attleborough, it has to be what works for you and your community, rather than just copying something that works for somewhere else. And national policy is starting to move in this direction. So the Department of Transport recently published this very big plan for decarbonising transport. And there's money that's going to follow this. This is, to use a terrible pun, this is the direction of travel for transport policy. And we were very pleased to see that it promotes the idea of 20-minute neighbourhoods and refers to our guide. But certainly worth having a look at that. So what opportunities could this provide? Attleborough's got a lot of new homes being planned, so quite a big amount of development. Could that new development provide perhaps some things that might be missing in the town at the moment? Could it help sort of fill in some of the gaps perhaps? And could the new development help create a more connected place? Could it help get more people coming in to do their shopping, to meet their friends, to do all those things that market towns traditionally did, but sometimes have been a bit lost over the last 50 years as we've prioritised cars over people in many places? And can that stimulate local businesses? But there are also, I think, some challenges looking at the proposed development. Obviously, there's the railway line running through the middle. Fantastic to have a railway in a station, and many places would be incredibly grateful for that infrastructure. But it does provide a barrier between the town as it is now and the proposed development area. And so I said that part of a successful 20-minute neighbourhood and introducing it is really understanding, getting data and facts about how the place is already working. So I'd really recommend a spatial analysis, so that as the new places are planned and links might be able to be provided across the railway, that those links are put in the right place to make it really work for people. And there are now ways of analysing spaces to make sure that things like bridges go in the right place to really help people. But also, I just thought I'd say that there are other places around the country that have grown in a similar way, and they've managed to get that growth, or they're trying hard to get that growth, to create a complete place, not a place that's cut in the middle by a railway line or road. And two places spring to mind. One is Cranbrook and one is Whitehill and Borden. And both of those were part of NHS England's Healthy New Towns project. And NHS England supported this project to find out how we could create new places or extend existing places in ways that created healthy, active environments. And the TCPA, the organisation I work for, helped put together the lessons from that project into some how-to guides, which you can download from the internet. And those two places I mentioned, Cranbrook and Whitehill and Borden, are mentioned in there. There's some more useful resources. You can download the TCPA's 20-minute neighbourhood guide and watch some webinars and videos about 20-minute neighbourhoods around the world. They're all on our website there. I've just mentioned the Healthy New Towns project and the information provided from that. That's free to download as well. And there's another project we worked on about embedding health and wellbeing into neighbourhood plans, which might be of interest. So I'll leave it there, but I'm very happy to answer questions if that would be helpful.
Julia, thank you very much. I mean, that's fascinating. There's a lot of information in there. I know it's going to take time to digest, but if you're okay for a few minutes, if I perhaps open it to the floor, and if any committee members or anyone have got any questions at this stage that you'd like to pose to Julia about what she said and what it's all about, that would be great. So, Taylor, you first, and then.
I was just going to ask if the presentation, so there's a lot of links and stuff that we can look at, if that could be forwarded to Michelle for distribution, so that we can maybe have a look at some of those links in our own time.
Yeah, thanks very much for your time, Julia. I know you discussed Australia, America, France, etc. Is there an example where it's gone from the start to the finish as to where it's achieving its objective that you described right at the very beginning of your presentation about what the community wanted, and was it eventually delivered?
I think it's fair to say, well, two things. I don't think this is a process that has a beginning and a middle and an end. It's an ongoing process to improve places. So to that extent, you know, places change, populations change, and it is a process rather than a fixed thing that you'll wake up one morning and say, oh, that's great, we've done it, it's all finished now. Some places have been undergoing this process for some time. So Portland, Oregon has been doing this for about 10 years or so. Melbourne, in some places, areas, has been doing it for about 10 years. In this country, it's newer, although the 20-minute neighbourhood idea resonates. I mean, it's quite similar to other ideas, such as garden cities and sustainable communities, but it's a way of packaging it so that it makes it's easier to explain to people. So I don't think I can say go and visit so and so, they've done it and it's finished and it's great. I think it's more of a work in progress, particularly in this country where it's a newer idea.
Can I rephrase the question then? Because my concern would be, how do you know whether something's been successful? Is that, have you got any examples whereby the community said we're in a better place now than where we were when we started?
The best I can give you on that is that places that have been implementing it, like in Paris, have voted back the politicians that wanted to implement it. So, for instance, Anne Hidalgo, the mayor of Paris, introduced this a few years ago, and it became really popular. And when it was up for election, she increased her majority, and there was a lot of support for it. So I suppose that indicates that people liked it. But I mean, it's a really good question, and I'm afraid I can't say here's a community that has said yes, brilliant. Other than the fact that the places where people are implementing it, it tends to snowball and seems to be getting stronger, not fizzling out.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned garden cities. Would you not say that Welling Garden City maybe was a good example? Our friend whose idea all this was at the turn of the 20th century, strikes me that your ideas are simply building on his.
Yes, absolutely. So it was Ebenezer Howard who invented the idea of garden cities, and he in fact set up the TCPA, the organisation I work for, and a lot of our work is understanding what works in garden cities. Letchworth, for instance, which was the first garden city, is in many ways a good example of this. I mean, over the years, you know, Letchworth was conceived of at the beginning of the 20th century, and then there was the First World War and the Second World War, and all sorts of things happened, but it is still in many ways a very, very successful place. I suppose that when Letchworth was conceived of, that was before cars became mass transport, and for some older places, a lot of this idea is about actually sort of getting rid of cars, making it easier for people to work and bringing the small businesses back in. So to some extent, you could argue that perhaps that planning took a bit of a, we all took a bit of a wrong turning by allowing cars to take over our towns and cities and squeezing out the people. And to some extent, it's a bit, in some places, it might be going back to where things were previously, and making sure that new development prioritises people over vehicles.
Thank you. Yes, Elizabeth.
My concern right the way along is about resourcing this, because on a garden city, you're dependent on the industry and the employment that actually will come into the garden city or to that area. And it sounds rather negative, but it's a perpetual problem in East Anglia that you haven't got the income coming into these towns for the ideas. The idea you're suggesting is very, very attractive, but it all needs resourcing. And we're a very poor county. We moved out, and the three-tier system doesn't assist it, because the county council hasn't a lot of money. Brecon Council has not a lot of money, and the same with Attleborough. So when you look to your own immediate area, we would like all these things, and we can go out and have wonderful meetings, and people will say what they want. It all actually costs. So you then look and say, well, okay, let's bring resourcing, let's bring employment and other things, and the people in that will provide income. But I feel that will certainly not happen in my lifetime, and what we're planning would take a very long time for resource. The same with you quoting about NHS England and their spending. They're being stretched to an extreme degree, whereby when you get down to a town the size of Attleborough, you've got to have a very, very good project and bid to actually attract that money here. And the reason, have you any views on that and how it works in a rural, basically rural, although a lot of people in Africa wouldn't think they are, basically we are a rural market town.
Yes, that's a very good point. It's something we talk about in the guide, the publication we've put together. Councils in England have had their funding reduced considerably in the last 10 years, and that does make it really difficult. And when we were talking to places like Paris and Oregon, we were really conscious when they described the things they'd done that they were far better resourced than most councils we come across in England. So it's, you're absolutely right, it's going to be difficult, but Attleborough is going to grow anyway. And I think there's a big question about how can you make sure that that growth that's going to happen anyway benefits everybody and doesn't just benefit the people who move in to the new area. How can you use that growth to join things up? And so there's an opportunity there to make sure that you make the best out of that growth that's going to happen anyway. And I think that making sure that the new part of Attleborough is as well connected and provides what it can in the best possible way to make sure that you end up with one place and not two places would make the best of the opportunity in front of you. It may not end up being as brilliant as you might want, but you can shape that development or have a say in that development to get the best place possible out of it. And that will mean making sure that it joins up with Attleborough. But there are other things you can do, and we set out a lot of these in our guide. There are things about spending money locally, about encouraging local businesses, and there's a limit to what you can do, but there are some things that you can do. And so I suppose what I'm saying is you don't have all the money or all the powers that you might want to take this forward, but there will be some investment, and that you do have some powers, and this is an opportunity to make the most of them and to push for something that could join all of this up and create a really good place that is joined together rather than perhaps two separate places that don't work so well.
Sorry, Julie, just a few more. Yeah, Debbie?
I'm interested in how you start the process. You talk about consultation with residents to see what they want. And my concern is that we have done this in recent years with the AMP project, which took a lot of money and a lot of time for people to push forward. So could you tell us, if we were to start this process, would we then have to do more consultations with the residents, which in turn would cost more money?
Given that you've already done quite a lot of consultation, you might have many of the answers you already need. Without, obviously, I'm not able to go back through what you've done so far, but you might already know quite a lot of the things that people want and quite a lot of the things that are working and that aren't working. So to some extent, this might be a way of communicating what you're already trying to do in a way that resonates with people a bit more.
Can I just add to that? As part of the AMP, there was a consultation exercise and there was a report written in terms of all the feedback, what people want. And as Julie says, your starting point is, what do you know? The next question is, what do you not know? And do you need to know that? And like any process going forward, there's always that, do we need to go back? And that's part of the discussion going forward. And everything we do as a council, as you know, in the previous committee, requires resources.
My concern is that as we've already had a consultation, that this doesn't just drag things on for longer, because we're continuing consultations, not actually implementing anything.
Agreed, but that's a good point. We'll debate that later on. It depends what we mean by consultation. So yes, I'm quite happy to open it up to our colleagues of the community at the back. I need to do standing orders again, if so.
Well, I don't think in the last proposal we specified that it was only for agenda items, so I would then say.
Okay. So I'm quite, Julie, if you don't mind, just a few more minutes. We've got a few members of the public here, and I'd like to give them the opportunity to ask any questions if they've got. No? Good. Okay, thank you. Well, thanks very much again, Julia. I really do appreciate your time. It's much appreciated, and the discussions we've had. As you know, you've seen the agenda. We're going to have a discussion later on, and I'll certainly be in touch with you. We'll let you know where we go, but hopefully we'll be meeting up again soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Take care. Good night. Okay, let's say that's no doubt going to move into agenda item number 8, but in the meantime, just dealing on with the day-to-day business of AMP projects, which, let me emphasise, will not be lost regardless of what happens. They will continue. So this is not just a meaningless discussion. So we've got 7A, which is Decoy Common. I'll just give you a quick update on that. We're still chasing the surveyors for that to get the topo, and then we'll get the design. So it's still ongoing at this stage. Once we get that done, we'll get designs. It'll come back to a council committee, and then go and get quotes and get that done, and no doubt come back to the council committee about what the wider opportunities that Decoy Common we would like to see. What I would like to add, and I'm not sure I mentioned this last time, but following a meeting with Carillion Homes and doing the Norwich Road development, we have asked if they could maybe incorporate and discuss with Breckland a footway link on the southern side of Norwich Road from Mill Lane to Decoy Common, which is currently grass verge at the moment as part of some planning goodwill measure, and to access open space for those. And that was positively received, but I can't give any promises on that. That will be a negotiation done by Breckland Council, but we'll be in touch with planning authority. London Road.
Sorry, just on Decoy comments. Yeah. So the survey is delayed which it was delayed at the last meeting. What do we know a timescale, and do we know what was causing the delay?
I've gone into radio silence with surveyors chasing again.
So we could be in the same situation next month.
I'd rather hope not, because last time I spoke to them, they said it was going to be done. But we're chasing them. The survey's been done. We just wait for it.
But we don't know why the delays.
I'm not coming back. Chasing up on that. But yeah, point taken. It's going on with it. London Road. Now, kindly asked Nicola, who's very kindly in your very, very busy schedule, to attend this evening with all the work you've done with other community members and groups, the football club, Scouts, Brownies, you name it, everyone's been involved. It'd be really good for the people around here, just give an update of what you've done, an awful amount of work you've done, and where we are with London Road specifically. That would be fantastic.
No, that's fine. And I'm sorry that I haven't been able to come before. I've got young children, so it's difficult to come out in the evening. So shall I start with the London Road project? Okay, so we've been working very hard. We've created a survey that we sent out to local schools. We haven't heard back from the head teacher yet as to when it's going out. I'm sure it will go out on the next newsletter. But we really want to consult. We want to see what the people would like to see. We also will send it out to neighbours as well. I've noted down your point and thought that was really important, because actually this is about what everybody wants, and it's not just about children, it's about young people and also other people that use the park. So we spent a long time talking about it in our group. We've been meeting up. We've put together a proposal of ideas. I've put together a PowerPoint that perhaps Michelle might be able to send out after this meeting for you all to have a look at. It's not perfect, but we tried our best, and we looked at the last work that had been done. I know there'd been lots of work previously, so we looked at that and we picked up the bits that we liked, and we put forward other suggestions. We thought about lots. We thought about inclusivity, thinking about children with disabilities. We thought about the different age groups, because at the moment the park is a bit of a purpose. It's old, rundown. Although lots of people use it because they need it. So I think it will be a really great project if it can go forward, and we'd really like it to happen as soon as we can. We've put some ideas together to share with you, but what we really would like is for you to look through it and to have a think, and maybe we can put forward to 3 different sort of park development people that might be able to draw up plans, because that's beyond my know-how. But yeah, but we've worked really hard on that, so it would be nice to see what your thoughts are. What we'd like to be able to do is, when some plans have then been drawn up based on what we've got here, is we'd like to be able to hold a morning at a weekend where we go out to the park and we show the 3 different ideas that might come forward and see what people think of it, because it's really important that the town are happy with it. Yeah, so that's kind of what we've done there. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Yeah, we have thought about a lot. I can present it to you, but I'm sure you can look at it yourself. So I've tried to share, we're going to share it on social media as well, but I'm really conscious that doesn't always work. I know Tato mentioned that earlier. So it's about getting out there in the right way. So the survey regarding parks isn't just about the Dodds Road or London Road Park. We've created a survey about all parks in the town so that it's useful to you all going forward, so that when other parks might then be developed, you've then got that data and information going forward. So we're trying to make it as useful as possible. It's quite comprehensive, but it can be filled in by a child or by an older person. So the other things that we've been doing too are, we've got this community survey that we've been sending out to lots of different groups. We've had about 30 responses so far, but we know that there are more groups in town. We've tried lots of different ways. We've tried emailing people, we've tried putting it on social media, we've made a few phone calls, but it'd be really good to push that again, because that information is so useful. Lots of people saying what they'd love to see in Attleborough, the things that they really like, the things that they need for their community groups. So I think that information will fit in really well with what you're talking about with Norfolk Homes and all the other ideas you're coming up with. So yeah, we have been trying to put things together and in place to help you all.
Brilliant.
That's
Thank you.
done. But I've printed it off, so if you want to look at it, you can. But I think probably emailing it out might be the best thing to do. But I think it'll be great. It'll be really exciting and a really nice thing for the town council to show the community and give them.
I really appreciate it. Thanks. Yes, Pip.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think it's great what you've done today. I think obviously during all the time and effort that's gone into it, and I don't think that anyone here would not appreciate that. I feel like during all of us sit here, we're volunteering our time, so we do understand and we do think, do you know what I mean, that is a huge commitment. One thing that I did raise when seeing the survey, just with Eddie, Phil and Michelle earlier this week, was that unfortunately, and this isn't your fault, it's our fault, it's the AMP committee's fault as a whole, is that the structures for the subcommittees have never been implemented, although they've been in principle supported. So obviously there's no mandate, there's no terms of reference, there's no committee like membership being appointed by the AMP committee, which would be required. So one thing that I did just raise was when these things are being advertised, it can't technically be advertised as a subcommittee of the AMP, or that it's under the authority of the town council.
Okay.
But it can be that you're obviously undertaking that work to report back to the town council or to feed into the town council's projects moving forward. That's fine. It's just a bit of a technical thing with the advertising. But what I would also add is that with the designs that you've worked on, obviously there was an original design, and you said you've worked on some other designs as well. When we applied for the S106 money to Brecon Council, obviously we submitted what we had today, and they said, like, that's absolutely fine, like, here's the money. But before we could spend that money, we needed a consultation. So, I mean, I don't know if you're prepared to head this with all the work that you've done today. I think to actually progress this and actually get some like final movement is to actually advertise the consultation. So it's all of those people that you just discussed, and obviously the community, the people that live around it, the people that be using that park on a day-to-day basis, and maybe have a site one at London Road Park and maybe one here in the town hall as well. So I think
that's a really good point. And were you talking about the new ideas or the old ideas for the park?
Well, the design that was done, the only design that we have, as far as I'm concerned, obviously that was commissioned by the town council. That design is the one that would have been submitted to Breckland when they were asking for the funding from S106, and the ward members, Breckland District Council ward members, obviously asked that a consultation take place before that money be spent, because there wasn't a very well advertised. I'm not saying it wasn't very good, because Vera assures me there was people there. But it wasn't very well advertised. So before obviously that takes place, we just want a very well advertised.
I think what Nicola's suggestion is, after you collect all these further ideas, consultations, what have you, there's a number of options, and the next stage to that is draw those options up more professionally, let's say, and have a better idea, and then consult on that. And as you said, it will be at the park on the weekend and everything else. So that process will happen.
And we're more than happy to. I know I didn't live in the town, but I know Vera did do that. There was a group, and friends of mine went to it with their children. And it definitely needs to be that, doesn't it? It needs to be that consultation in person. But these are just our ideas. They need to be put to a professional park development company. And I've listed 3. And one of our members has spoken to somebody from Rocklands who developed a great park there, and we talked to her for advice, and some of the companies listed are those local companies that have been recommended. We did look at the previous designs, but we all thought that maybe there was scope for a few more ideas, so I'll see what you think of it, and perhaps if we can get a really good design together, or even 2 or 3 based on our thinkings, then that could then be put to the people, couldn't it? In a really well advertised day.
Just to reassure people, we will go through the correct procurement processes to get designs on that.
Oh, we're just
Yeah, no, absolutely. You've done all the hard work, absolutely. Joe and then Elizabeth. I thought you did. Sorry, Joe. Elizabeth.
I just want to. I know the park very well because I go there a lot. But who, when you're doing the survey, are you proposing that it will be for? As it will be the whole town will be wanting to access it, or will it be really geared to that area and the new builds from Homes England down that end of the town? Who's the time there? Because I think there's a big issue which already exists, because I live in West Car Road on the other side, and it's the one place that we can get to with grandchildren and other children, my own children, even further back. But there is the issue of that road, And you've now got 2 housing estates on the far side from the park. And I think it needs some sort of footbridge as a safety measure, and that should be included when you're looking at it, or certainly should be assessed with advice from either highways or the police. There's been some quite near accidents where children see people running, and you've got to keep a really good grip on young children because they forget the bit in between. And I think with the more children that are going to be on those new estates, it might be an issue.
Well, this is something under public participation. The community who emailed me today was looking at that London Road crossing, and there's some ideas there, zebra crossing, what have you, and we need to pick that up with highways.
It's too fast a road. You need footbridge.
You're right, but this comes back to what was said earlier of taking that holistic approach of where are places and how they're connected, and revisiting that, because what I do know from experience is planners in highway, or there's a plot of land, there's a road, what do we do with it? They do not look at what's all around that, and do people start walking through it and crossing it? There is never ever a holistic approach in planning, which is why we're going to come on to the agenda item in a minute. But you're quite right. So, yes, Tristan, sorry.
At a previous meeting, we spoke about themes for play areas. Yep. Does that fit in with a theme?
Well, I think you mentioned that, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we've got ideas there. But also the survey we thought also could help identify themes as well. But it's probably best. I didn't want to present it, but it's probably best to have a look at it. Yeah, we can have a look at it. But also the survey should go out to everybody, regardless of their age, whether you've got young kids or whether you haven't got kids. It's about everybody, isn't it, that uses the park? People go to the park for all sorts of reasons.
And I think critically, we use the word park, but because Atterbury is so deficient of open space. If we class it as it's open space that the whole community needs, not just a park, but yeah, then we have things for, and I think it's a different mindset because we have so little open space within that. It's ridiculous. Yes, Debbie.
The community survey, would it be possible for us to see a copy of it?
Yeah, so I've sent it to Michelle. I have only done it this evening.
Oh,
that's my fault.
Is that the one you're sending out to the clubs and that?
Yeah, so there's 2 surveys at the moment. There's one finding out what's on in town, what clubs there are, what groups, and then there's the other survey that's just about parks and open spaces.
Could we see both of them?
Yeah, they're all linked in this PowerPoint.
Okay. So much for that. So to take this forward, depending on items under item 8, but certainly through the council, we'll be taking it forward in terms of taking the ideas, here's a game plan, getting quotes to do the designs, and then follow that process through. So it's not going to end tonight, I can really assure you of that in terms of what body it goes through. But I've said we do need to crack on. And again, I just want to thank you and everyone else for your patience and diligence and commitment, quite frankly.
That's okay. It's not as much as we will do a lot more, but it's just all of the people that are involved in this and all community people that just want to help from all different groups. So
which is what we try to create through this committee, which perhaps not worked as well as it should have done, but it shining light, absolutely shining light. Thank you. Moving on, unlinked, what we've got is 7C recreation ground. I don't know, Bill, if you want to update on that.
What has been mentioned already is we've got kind of a on the field informal consultation where we just give an appetizer. We're going to be there. You want to talk about what's happening, come along and have a chat, and that's on the 28th. So that's going to be the kickoff on to that one. We're bringing a few of our loose ideas with us that we can start just feeling things out and bring together. But the centre project on that is going to be the wheel park, as we call it now, not the skate park, the wheel park. And Andy, who has apologised for not being here, he's not very well. I hope he's not watching this, but actually resting and getting better. He's already getting things together with some of the ideas in the background on this, but it is just a case of we want to feel out things. So yeah, we will advertise that as well moving forward. And yes, neighbours are very much welcome, Nigel. Okay. That's about it at the moment.
Okay, thank you. So we'll get progress at whatever meeting we have next. Okay, moving on to item 8. So this has been put forward and it's dissolved the Asper Neighbourhood Planning Committee. So I don't know if you want to.
Yeah. Let me have a chat on this and explain some of the reasons for it. What we did when we set up the AMP committee, or we rejigged the AMP committee, was we wanted to engage more with the community, because the steering groups really created the AMP and worked very well in engaging with the community. I was part of that. I wasn't a councillor at the time, but part of what brought it together and made it happen in the first place. It went really well until the ownership was taken over by the town council, at which point the brakes went on, the delivery stopped. So we tried a year ago in rejigging what the AMP was and try and make it once again more of a community-based driven project. The problem is the association of the town council. The association of the town council and the bureaucracy of any council kills projects pretty quick. And what we need to do is look at a way of reinvigorating the projects so they deliver. We've got a great planning document, which the AMP is. It's a planning document. It isn't how we deliver it. So we've looked at various options on how we can deliver this. There's really 2 areas on delivery that we could progress far quicker and far more efficiently than doing what we're doing at these meetings now. The first of those is matters that we do not have a direct control over or rule over. It's not within our mandate to make specific decisions on, such as the engagement that we have with Homes England on the Ptarmigan site and the delivery of the 1,200 homes that are coming in. And John's very much coming in here, and we're talking about it, we're engaging, and thankfully to Homes England, they're engaging with us on this. But it isn't our planning authority to rule on these things. We're consulting, we're influencing, and like what was said about the TCPA, they are very happy to work within the framework of a 20-minute neighbourhood, because it's something that aligns very much with their ideals and their perspective on how they want the town to be built going forward. So we're looking at those things, I would say, above the town council's direct rule. Those things outside our direct control. Going into a steering group, because we know steering groups work. It's something that we've had conversations with Simon Wood, head of planning at Brecon Council, so that we start tying up all of the key people into the room. So rather than we have a discussion about it at this meeting, they have a discussion at Breckland's meeting, we have a discussion with Homes England, we have a discussion with Carillion, we have a discussion with the Environmental Agency or with Highways or every other group that we've been talking about tonight, and then we're all coming back and coordinating things. We just get the right people at the right time in the same room and thrash things out. So we can report back on what the things we can do and the things that we can't do. So there's proper and transparent communication on those matters we can influence and those matters we can't influence. So the aspirations are kept in check, but the delivery of the vision of the AMP is allowed to move forward in a more direct manner on those big ticket items and those big gaps which we know about, which is sports provision, healthcare and other bits and pieces that need addressing within the community to create this 20-minute neighbourhood. So the steering group becomes a representative or representations from the town council, guided representation, I should say, on that by the town council, that we're able to have these discussions at a level with the people that make the decisions. So it becomes a far more efficient framework for us to move forward on. And so far, the key stakeholders are willing to engage with us on this. So this isn't pie in the sky. This is with Homes England. This is with Brecon Council, the Environmental Agency, Carillion Homes and others, with things that are, AtCare have been having discussions about, with the CCJ and other things to do with the NHS. They're willing to have a discussion with us about those things at that level. So we start getting the right people around the table to have that. Below that, we reinstate the environmental committee to discuss matters of which town council has the authority to act upon. So things like London Road, things like Decoy Common, and other matters that are local. So what it does is it splits it. We start having discussions in the environmental committee about things that we can decide on without going to further consultation. Yes, we do our due diligence and we do the right practice, but then we start being a delivery mechanism for those things of which we have a right to rule on and have the influence over. But those things that we don't are separated out into a bigger discussion. So rather than this committee becoming, a very small cog in a big machine that very easily can be overlooked, we get a seat at the table where it really matters. So that's the idea. The real principle of this is delivery. It's about delivering the aspirations of the AMP in the best way possible with the tools that we have in hand. It allows freedom for community groups to engage with us without the bureaucracy. It returns it to back steering committee style, where if you're willing to be part of this and you can bring something to the table, we welcome you without tying down to the bureaucracy that perhaps we need to work at a town council differently to community groups. So it's a win-win. And you can see with the presentation on the TCPA, because we're starting to line ourselves with lots of other things which line up with the NHS and transport and everything else, where it's all kind of going back to these fundamental principles. We're actually pushing in the same political direction as everyone's trying to get to. So we're working with these big things rather than against them. It separates it into those two tiers. That's in a nutshell.
Okay. Can I, before I come to you, Taylor, can I just add to that? The thought process. One of the problems we've had, and this applies to every town council, parish council, or even district council, is how do you translate or communicate your strategic ambitions and aspirations onto the ground? Because even district councils are limited. All you do is give planning permissions and bit of money, and that's not criticism. It is. This is how the system works, and this is why we've looked at how do we retain our strategic ambition and our desire to be different and deliver sustainability and address the issues over the next 5, 10, 20 years in a manageable manner, and dissecting what can we do here and today. And they are two separate things. To do that strategic bit, we can't do it by ourselves because we're very limited in our powers of town council. This is why the attractiveness of the 20-minute neighbourhood that people are willing to sign up to, because it's tangible, it's visual. And what's interesting, those 7 pillars in that circle, if you look at the AMP, remarkably, they pretty much match the 7 themes we've got in the AMP. So this is not ripping the AMP up. It's saying, actually, we were quite, forward thinking 5 years ago. This is how we take it forward. That attracts the key stakeholders together, and you've got, as Julie said, you've got that vision that everyone signed up to. And once you've got that vision, you've got the key stakeholders going. This addresses what was the Asper Development Partnership, of what body now do we look at to deliver this with Homes England, with Target and others. What is that leadership? What is that strategic body that we're all aligned to, all signed up to, the same aims, same objectives to deliver? As an AMP committee, we can't do that. And we've not been able to do it. And it's become very cumbersome, it's become a bit bureaucratic, which is why we're suggesting we take this step back. There's a project there that I believe aligns to our aspirations of the town. We want to be an exemplar. It will attract money, it will attract outside interest. And by doing that, you attracting that interest, you attract money. It puts pressure on politically, absolutely. But then again, we're all signed up to climate change and resilience and everything else and sustainability. All these things that are in there, why would we not do it? So what I would say as chair, we've tried with the AMP, we've given it our best shot. I don't think it's working as well as it could do, because it does take people time, and they've got time and bureaucracy and what have you. It's not worked as well as it could do. I think this proposal of 20-minute neighbourhood, and we do need to look at the detail, we do need to look at what does it actually mean in practice. We do need to know, Breckland, are you really on board? Who's going to lead it? Who's going to pay for it? How's it going to be resourced? All those things need to be looked at, and they will be looked at if it's agreed to go forward. But personally, for, you know, as a chair and also from a professional point of view, as a planner, I think this is the only way forward. It gives us our best chance to deal with those strategic ambitions that all these people are signed up to, so I would say not do it. And yet, okay, get breathing space to do the day-to-day stuff on the open spaces, the rec and what have you. But it creates that leadership, it creates that new form of after development partnership that we've all been saying, what's happened to it, where is it, how's it going to go forward, and we do need it. And I think this proposal is the way forward to do that. It's not going to be easy. There are going to be challenges. There is a lot of detail that you may well ask tonight, but I've no idea what the answers are. But this is the principle of it's worthy for a discussion. I think it's the best way forward, and we'd like to move that forward and take it to full council. Yes, Taylor.
Yeah, I don't have any objections in the sense that obviously, as long as the AMP's not forgotten, and this, like you say, is the delivery method of it. Because I want people to be clear, especially members of the public and people viewing at home, that the AMP has not been time, effort, money wasted today, because this is how that will, if this resolution is passed, be implemented. So that's not to say the AMP is going to be kicked to the side and the 20-minute town or whatever is replacing it. It's actually the transport to deliver it. The other thing was just with the steering group, obviously it says on the agenda, help form and appoint representation. And the way that we've been speaking about it now, and again, this isn't an objection from me, like in principle, I support the idea. I do think it needs to just be clear, you know, the steering group, obviously, if we're helping to form it and appointing representation, it's not a town council steering group. It's, do you know what I mean, who, just for clarity, just for everyone else's sake, who is, do you know what I mean, seen as to have ownership of that? Like, do you know what I mean, who is heading it, who's preparing the terms of reference for it? And speaking of which, obviously, if this is agreed tonight, before the town council consider if this is like the final decision they want to make, I think if there was a copy of those terms of reference for their consideration, so they're making an informed decision, would be preferable, so they know exactly what they're entering into and what they're appointing two representatives to, or I say two, I assume it's going to be two people at least. Do you know what I mean? Just so there's that absolute understanding, clarity. There's not going to be any, do you know what I mean?
Okay, if I could, but you're absolutely right, and I think not pulling this apart. I think some of the wording it might be a bit premature at this stage, because as we debate it, we've got to come up with final wording of a proposal if there is a proposal. What I'd like to come back to in terms of the AMP, categorically confirmed the AMP is not a redundant document. If anything, and again, my meetings with TCPA and with Breckland, we have to review the AMP anyway. It needs updating, it's over 5 years old. And as Julia mentioned in there, if you take this concept, it will be reviewed, and it matches the things we've got of updating it anyway, but within the 20-minute neighbourhood concept. So the AMP needs to be reviewed regardless. Whether this committee dissolves or not, the AMP needs reviewing and updating, and we're in discussion with Breckland about that. All it means is changing it slightly with a different vision, but the vision is still the same, if that makes sense. In terms of terms and conditions of that group, that needs to be a discussion. The principle is, do we want to do this? And then the principle is, we need to talk to key stakeholders. Are they on board? Homes England have said yes. Brilliant has said yes. Breckland, we need to have a further discussion. And once you get that, you then have a debate about, well, what is that leadership body? And then from that, you start developing what are the terms of reference. They need to come back to the town council for approval of, this is the proposal. Are we happy? Yes, no. If not, why not? So I think at this stage, say it's going to be 2 people, it's going to be this. That is prejudging all the other key stakeholders that need to be involved and say, hold on a minute, what are we signing up to here? So you're right, we need to go through that process, but I think it's a bit premature at this stage. So
can I just come in there just to help answer that one question before we go on to the other questions? Yeah, the proposal really is to help form in a sense. Bretland have expressed an interest in helping put together the terms of reference for it, but we have yet to see that. So we want to be able to have that conversation further, but to do that we need the authority to have from the council to enter into conversations. It would mean that we then bottom out the terms of reference and bring it back to town council for approval. So that this is the step to get to that point rather than making the final step.
sorry, so Vera, Tristan, Mary, sorry if you don't mind.
Having done it the way you tried, Eddie, and I do admire the fact that you admit it hasn't worked the way you wanted it to, and I admire you for that because it's hard. But I think we need to have people around the table with other stakeholders that actually know what they're talking about. You're a planner, Phil's a businessman. You actually know what you're talking about, and that will move us forward. If we're not round the table with these people, we're never going to get anywhere. And you've put in here, will affect Attleborough's future development, where the town council is not directly responsible for making decisions. But if you're not round the table, you can't influence these people. And I think they can have meetings without you, but then you haven't had the opportunity to influence them. So I think it's the way forward, you know, to actually do the best for Attleborough. Like Phil, I spent hours on the steering committee, hours, you know, and I would like to see the document that came out put into practice. And I think the only way that's going to happen, is if we've got people that know what they're talking about with other people that know what they're talking about, you know, that's really going to move it forward. And I would support it wholeheartedly.
Thank you. Tristan.
So to become unpopular on the opposite side, one, to do it in sequence, is the ANP working well as it should? No. I think you need to look at why it's not working well, and I take responsibility in that because I sit on it. So that's the first one. It feels like a rebadge. It feels like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, to be perfectly honest with you. This whole 20-minute neighbourhoods plan project, I'm not against it, but I'm not signed up to it. You sent me the 80-odd page document that just made my eyes glaze over. I listened to Julia, and I'm even less convinced after listening to her. Talking about France, talking about America, talking about Australia, is not comparable. Don't know any of the details with regards to this person being re-elected in Paris. So it's all meaningless. And if Julia thinks Hailsham's in Essex when it's actually in East Sussex, also gives me a little bit of cause for concern as well. I think you need to have a proper look. I think it's too early to have this question, to be perfectly honest with you. Just sort of spring it on us. I think that's wrong. I think there needs to be more scrutiny of why the ANP isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing. And I think if you go ahead with it, I mean, I'm not a town councillor, so you guys probably will go ahead with it. If you do go ahead with it, I think you'll end up being in the same place as what you were before. And just to add, that's what I honestly think. You know, there's no point in me pulling any punches on it. And a lot of what Phil described is the ADP. You know, it's reinventing the wheel. You've got the ADP ready to rock and roll with all the people signed up to it. So why do you want to reinvent the wheel and have a smaller version of the ADP? That I don't understand. My understanding is that Bretland aren't signed up to the 20-minute town. And the question is Norfolk County Council? signed up to the 20-minute town? Because if they're not, or you don't know that they are, it sort of defeats the whole object, doesn't it?
Well, if I can just come back to that, I get, because I've done research projects with the European Commission, and you look at different cities and you try and apply it. And yeah, it's always very dangerous. I mean, I've been to Portland looking at park and ride. How does that apply to Leicester in the UK? It doesn't matter, it's a trip over, it's great. Conceptually, the principles are still the same, and I think this is where it gets difficult for people to understand the principles of we want to make a good town, good city, good urban area are the same wherever you go. And the principles of making that happen is you need people, you need communities, you need collaboration, you need leadership, and you can apply that at all different scales. It gets more difficult the higher it goes up, and it's more political, it's more expensive. The principles still apply. In this 20-minute neighbourhood, the principles apply to whatever scale it is, which I said could be a 15-minute city, 20-minute neighbourhood, 15-minute neighbourhood. The principles are still there, and those principles around that circle are still there that we'd all sign up to. I defy anyone to say I don't agree with that. You're quite right, we're rebadging. Now, the ADP has not done anything in the last 5 years. And you're saying it's ready to go. Well, where is it? Because no one's aligned to signing up what the vision is. We said to Brecon, the ADP, for instance, is there to deliver the neighbourhood plan. And Anna Grove said, no, it's not.
Ed, can we not go back years, because that really isn't helpful.
No, okay, you're right, but it is a thought process of how do we progress? How do we get everyone signed up to the concept of we're all going in that direction, and we all need to work collaboratively and give and take, and things have moved on and the world has changed dramatically. And it is revisiting that. And when you revisit it, it is a slight rebadge sometimes. This is not tearing everything up and restarting again. It certainly isn't. The mechanics are there. And all we're suggesting, and it's up to you committee members, of we believe, I believe, well, I'll put my neck on the block, I believe this is worthy of a discussion that needs to be discussed with Brecon. You're quite right, they've not signed up to it. County Council have not signed up to it yet. But we need authority from the town council to say, for our town, to make things happen and be as aspirational as we want to be and do all those things that's up there, we need authority to explore this idea with key stakeholders. We've already got Homes England on board. We need to explore that, and all the idea of tonight is to get that permission to explore that conversation and see if it goes somewhere. If it comes back, it's a dead duck, fine. We'll carry on doing what we do. So it's not a commitment, it's worthy of a discussion, and to say it's not worthy of discussion, that's fine, that's a view as well, and that's open for discussion.
Can I come back?
Yeah,
great, because what you've just said right there is not what is on here. This isn't about let's get the thumbs up for a further discussion. If you want to get a thumbs up for a further discussion, then I'd support that. That's not what this is saying. This is to say the dissolve the ANP and then go and create a new body that's going to do X, Y, and that's very different. And I reinforce what I said earlier, is that you're far too many steps ahead with regards to trying to do this, because Brecon are not on board. You don't know whether NCC is going to be on board. So why would you go to the length of what's on here when you could find out that some stakeholders are not signed up? That to me is...
That's a proposal that's been put on, and we can debate that. Proposals, as you know, can be named, can be changed, or something totally different. It's there for discussion of, we feel action needs to be taken, we want to be progressive. That's a proposal, we can discuss it, we can amend it, we can change it. But that, absolutely. So...
But also, I can also come back, because I think it's so important. Why has this not succeeded? You've got to get to the bottom of why this has not succeeded, because otherwise your chances are you're going to fail again because you haven't learned all the lessons from before.
Well, I don't want to go into those details in public.
No, I'm not saying go into the detail, but nothing on here says that they're going to look into something to try and find out why this hasn't succeeded.
Well, we'll do that. But okay, let's move on. So I think it was Debbie, and then Bill, and then Andy, and then Claire. Sorry.
I agree with Councillor Ashby to a big degree, in that the AMP isn't working for whatever reason, and obviously we need to do something to implement what was agreed, but it comes across this evening as the only option is to go down the 20-minute neighbourhood. And how I'm being sold the 20-minute neighbourhood is it's just another name for an AMP. It's another consultation. It's another asking people. We've already asked people. We've already got, we know what people want. And if we're unable to implement it, we need to look at why we can't implement it and the best way forward. But to actually just change the name, form something else, and as Councillor Ashby says, what's going to happen? We'll go into consultations. We'll have another strategy. It will just keep going. And I think that we really need to stop and look at why we haven't been able to achieve what we wanted to achieve on the AMP, be it through finances, be it whatever, and then look at the best way to do that. If that means having a cross-party, a bigger forum of stakeholders involved in some sort of group meetings regularly towards the development of Attleborough, that's fine. But to actually just move into yet another strategy, this 20-minute town idea, seems to me we're going back to the beginning again. We're starting over again, and we're just going to keep going.
Well, yeah, thank you. Andy or Taylor, you first.
Okay. You can go first.
I'm relatively new to the council, so I'm seeing this as an outsider. Separating the AMP as a committee from the AMP as a document. Am I right in thinking the document was written about 5 years ago?
Yeah.
How much of that document has been delivered in the last 5 years?
Probably not much, because let me qualify that, because
Hang on, excuse us.
Excuse us.
Sorry, let me explain. Sorry, hold on. I'm saying not much. I'm not saying not. Oh no, excuse me. I think that's a bit unjust. When I say not much, it's because as a town council, of what the town council can actually implement is very limited. Things have happened outside, such as ACCA. That's not town council, that's a separate body. So as a town council, what we've been able to influence and implement, we can give support, we give some money for surveys and what have you to the UEA, this, that, and the other. We've cajoled, we've tried to shape things. We as a body, as a town council, this is the nub of it, as a town council, we're not the planning authority, really don't have much influence other than the open spaces we've got. And politically, it depends how you get on with your key stakeholders, locally, district, county, everything else. So to answer your question, honestly, from my perspective, I'm as frustrated as anyone, because I helped draft it years ago and helped set it up. Not much. Things have happened, and there have been some great successes. And you know, the pressure on the linear path is being taken forward. So there have been successes, and ACCA, you've been successful. Other things, it's not worked as well. And the reason is, from my experience, is we haven't, and we'll go back to the ADP, we haven't got those key stakeholders saying what we're trying to achieve. So a bit of history lesson, the ADP was set up not to deliver the AMP. That was categorically said. It was, we'll take some management and we'll allow people on board. That's a different kind of collaboration. What we're asking is, that needs to be revisited. The time's moved on, we need to work closely.
Can you, sorry, interrupting you, can you tell for people that don't know what the ADP was?
So the ADP
Please, sorry.
was, some of you will know, it was called the Attleborough Development Partnership. And when the AMP was being developed, Breckland suggested that a governing body should oversee the development of Attleborough, called the Attleborough Development Partnership. And as part of that, they brought an independent chair, paid for by Breckland, which is fine. And there were lots of arguments about how many seats the council should have and voting rights and what have you. And the town council itself was pretty marginalised. In terms of influence, what went on in the town, straight away it was marginalised. And at the time we said that model is not fit for purpose. I said it. And it's true. We can shake out. I mean, it's all conjecture. The ADP has not existed for a while. And I'm not, the principle is correct, which is why I was suggesting under the speed sheet, we need something similar.
So
It's that collaboration that we need. The AMP, as it is at the moment, isn't that. Breckland deal directly with the developers. The developers are not sure whether to deal with Breckland or the town council. The Environment Agency don't know who to talk to. They'll talk to us, but what influence do we have? So what you've got is a dysfunctional, mutually exclusive key bodies currently trying to operate together. Even with the AMP, it needs to be reviewed. And that's what was suggested tonight.
So going back to what I was saying, so the AMP as a committee, does the AMP have the authority to make the AMP the document it's already clear? Yes, it's a document.
What linked, what worked with it already. When we mentioned it to Carillion Homes, they immediately knew what worked, what linked, and what they could bring to the table to help deliver that process. So we weren't pushing against a closed door, we were pushing against open doors. We've had conversations with Breckland about it higher up, but we've also had conversations with Simon Wood, who is having a look at this as something that can model around this. It isn't a closed door, but we do need to have these discussions more formally, which is where we need the approval to do so. By linking ourselves together around a nationally agreed process that does this, what we're not trying to do is reinvent something or do something differently, but just have sign-in so we all start pushing in the same direction rather than mutually exclusive or different aspirations and ideas. It becomes the best chance of delivering it. If you would have been in the meetings I have been in with Breckland, with Homes England, with Korea, with other environmental agency and so on and so forth, you will recognise that this opens doors that we have not been able to open as a town council prior to this. And that's about delivery. One of the other things it does by separating into those things where we can influence and those things that we have already influence over by an environmental committee is it stops the quagmiring of local projects that we can deliver now. It means when we talk about things in an environmental committee, or call it whatever you will, amend this as you want to call it, it doesn't matter the name so much. But what you do is you've got a meeting then discussing things that we can decide to move on, not being quagmired by other things that we don't really have as big an influence as many feel that we do. And that's important because we do need to see delivery on those things that we can move forward.
Sorry, one last thing.
Sorry, well, Debbie's had her hand up.
Going back to this idea of being with people who can influence the implementation of the AMP, I think we have to be honest with ourselves and say, for example, the London Road development, the play area, how long have we had that money sitting there to do that? We have the money there. And so we collectively as a town council have failed to deliver that. We can't say we needed other people on board. We can't say we needed Breckland to help us. We've had that money sitting there for a long while and we've failed as a town council to implement it up till now. And it's still, nowhere. So my concern is that, yes, something needs to happen, whether it's the dissolving of the AMP or what, to implement the AMP plan, but we can't say that the excuse for things not happening over the previous years has been solely because we haven't had the other stakeholders on board. I think that, through mismanagement, whatever you want to call it, things haven't been happening. And my concern is that by going along, whether you call it Homes England, not Homes England, what's called the thing one, it's some 20-minute thing, whether we call it that, which the principle of it, yeah, lovely idea, or something else. I just don't want us to sign up to something else and still years down the line, nothing's happened.
Okay, can I, just for clarity and people watching at home, I don't think anyone said what you're alluding to, that about London Road. Yeah, things have gone wrong with that, but that doesn't mean we need everyone around the table to do that, and we need the 20-minute neighbourhood to do that. No one said that. So I think just for clarity, let's separate that.
But that has been under the AMP.
You're right. No,
yes, it's been under AMP committee.
Absolutely, all due respect. Yeah. But let's separate that. What we are saying back to the aspirations of the town, and I think all those 7 pillars around there are better health, housing for all. Why would you not sign up to that? Why would you not sign up to that? And I think the message we're trying to say is to get NHS around the table, to get highways around the table, to get the developers around the table, to get Force England around the table. They recognise this, they're involved in it, they're actually doing it, they're promoting it. And if we say we're part of that, you've got an open door to them. If we stay narrow and say we've got an AMP committee, you're not going to get those doors opened. We've tried. We're not saying rip the AMP up. The AMP is a planning policy document. It needs review. It's going to change. And actually, as part of that review, it'll probably align more to the 20-minute neighbourhood now than what it did 5 years ago, through how planning policy has changed. So you've got these alignments going on. We can either say, we sit where we are, it's not work, but let's revisit it and do a consultation. and carry on, or we take a step, say actually the world has moved on, there are challenges there, and we do want to accept those challenges. And it provides more opportunity to open the door with key stakeholders. We've got more of a say in that than what we will ever have carrying on with the model or a revised model or what have you than what I've got at the moment. I think that's the crux of the discussion this morning. Yes, Andy, in that tone.
It was just to say, one of the things that Lady said earlier was that you needed the leadership to be able to drive it forward. Would the AMP, this committee as it stands, have that leadership to drive things forward? Would this 20-minute steering group have the leadership to drive things forward? Because as far as I can see it, the council can act on certain individual things that come under council remits. But a lot of this doesn't come under council remit. It doesn't come, it comes under many different authorities and many different groups. And even if with this new group or this existing group would either have the remit to move things forward, or would we be 5 years down the line, still around the table, still talking about a plan?
Okay, what I would say to that is the leadership in 20-minute neighbourhood committee, group, development partnership, whatever you want to call it, they would be responsible for the delivery aspect over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years time. The town council will have a seat on that, it will have influence on that. So the answer is yes, otherwise it's not worth doing. And I totally agree. I am not proposing anything, I'll say this professionally as well, that is not going to change the world and we're just going to stay where we are. I don't see any points in it. I'm frustrated things have not happened. And I'm trying to find ways to move things forward. And this is one way of getting everyone on board to sign up to it. Or if they don't want to sign up to it, please explain why not. But you need everyone around the table. Town council is one of those people around the table to say, this is how we're going to move forward over the next 15, 20, 30 year build down periods. How we change society, behavioural change, getting people to walk and cycle more, get kids to walk and cycle more. Adapt society. That's what planning is about. You've got to change and adapt. Totally.
Yeah, I was just going to say, with the steering group and the way that it's been explained, and obviously the stakeholders that would be involved, I do think that's a good idea. I do think it's a good idea to have those people around the table rather than, you know, just us, so that there's that one forum where those discussions can be had. I think that's a good idea. I think from conversations I've had and from the way that Vera's explained it as well, the understanding is this could quite possibly happen with or without us at that table. And if that table is going to be formed, then I think it's wise for us to have a seat at it rather than no representation at all. I did think there was a little point where there was a bit of confusion when Tristan was talking about the ADP, and obviously you said, well, you know, we were only like a minute voice on that. Well, we'd only be a minute voice on this. It's in that respect, our voice is not going to be any louder or stronger. It's still going to be a town council representative on a steering group or committee or whatever else. Like it's, do you mean, it's not in our ownership as such. So that's not going to be any different, I don't think, in that respect.
Can I just give a principal answer to that? That's why the TCPA's 20-minute town is a good idea. And the reason is it magnifies the community voice far more than if we were just sitting as one member without planning authority on the same committee. If we just sat there as a member, a minor member, with all the other big boys who make the decisions and have the money, we won't be heard. The ADP or whatever other model you have, we are the minorities. That's how it will be. The principle of having the 20-minute neighbourhood is it amplifies through data, through real communication with the community, the voice of the community for the community. And it allows our voice as a community to be heard higher up and with more force than would otherwise be done. Otherwise, we're doomed to repeating the same mistakes. Tristan made a very good point. Could be seen as a rebadging. If it goes to ADP, it's rebadging. If it comes through 20-minute neighbourhood, this is not a rebadging. This is an amplification of the voice and the delivery mechanism unlike we have ever had before, and it will deliver. What we really want to do is learn the lessons from this. We need to learn the lessons. And the problem is, we meet around the table, and myself feel very passionate about the big ticket items on the AMP, because that's the things that I fought hard for. So a lot of the effort, the volunteering effort, goes into meeting with people, seeing what we can do, how can we influence things and everything else. And some of what isn't to the community, but certainly can be perceived as lesser items like London Road, don't get the manpower and the effort put into it because we're so busy chasing our tails, focusing on different areas. Splitting it into these two tiers then creates focus for delivery. And that's what we need right now. We need to amplify our voice and we need to focus delivery. This is learning the lessons of the past.
And can I just add to that, Taylor, and anyone around the table wants to speak? This is conceptually different. I mean, as Mary knows, I mean, TCPA, they're one of the founders of Garden City Principles. And I think you go around this table, everyone would sign up to Garden City Principles. This is an extension of that. And Garden City Principles and 20 Million Neighbourhood Principles are its community driven. And if you sign up to it, and yes, there needs to be discussions with referendums and all the other key stakeholders, but there's items in there that they need to deliver. And if they sign up to it, it's not, we'll do an ADP and you get 1 seat. It's a different leadership in governance arrangements. And if we drive this, and it's up to us if we want to or not, but if we drive this, we are driving it, and you influence it. The ADP, we didn't. We were catching up, we were being told. So it's a philosophical dynamic change to what we've had previously. And that might be that, what does that mean? But conceptually, it's different. It does lead us to drive it. We are delivering all these things we want to do. We're asking people, do you want to be on board, yes or no? Or we stay here, try and do our best, and it's not going to work. It's not worked over 5 years. It's not going to change in the future. And there's a real, you know, next either tonight or next few weeks, some critical decisions as a town council. What do we do here? So I just wanted to consider those. So
this principle of a group being set up to talk about the delivery of these houses in the community is going to be happening regardless.
I don't know who was first.
I think Taylor's before me.
Mary's
Oh, Mary, sorry.
Yes, I'd just like going to throw in a somewhat cynical remark. We've heard of cloud cuckoo land, have we? I do believe that you have an opinion that if you sit at a table with a lot of key stakeholders, then they'll let you say and know what you and take into account what you want. But when all is said and done, all major decisions are way out of the remit of a parish council, a town council, or even a district council, aren't they? They're down to money and house building.
Okay, can I just, I'll just respond to that now, Mr. Taylor. Professionally, I totally disagree with that. I think you're wrong. So,
yeah, I still am going to say this is broken. Like, it's quite clear this is broken. So I'm not opposed to trying something different. But I think at this point, obviously an in-principle agreement could be made. Before anything else actually happened though, there's so many unanswered questions. The fact that it's gone 9 o'clock and we're still debating this item, I think obviously shows how many unanswered questions there are. I think obviously before any final agreements, I know obviously you said it's an in-principle agreement for another in-principle agreement at the full council so that, you know, feelers can be put out for this. But I also think where Tristan said, well, this has failed, why? And you said, obviously, well, I don't want to discuss that in public. I think actually a report needs to be put together before a final decision is made by the full council. And I actually think every decision we make should be justified to the public. That report should be public, no matter what the consequences of that are, as long as it's not, you know, people's personal information. Then I think that needs to be justified, because the amount of time and effort and money that's gone into this, if it's not working, everyone deserves to know why, not just people that are privileged enough to be sat at this table. And I think that, like I said, like an actual report with the structure, with terms of reference, because 1 minute we're driving this, the next minute someone else is. I think we need absolute clarity, because I'm getting more confused by the minute.
Yes, yeah.
Well, I was going to go off that because I thought if we reinstated the environmental committee, we'd get a damn sight more done with that committee. I mean, Taylor and I think you, Ed, were on the council when we had an environmental committee, and a lot used to get done. You know, simple things and big things. And I think if we went back to an environmental committee, which I'm all in favour of, it would be concentrated on things that we can do for the town now. And I think that's important. I don't know, there was a lot done on the environmental
committee was one of our
best. It was, yeah. And I think if that was reinstated, a lot of the, you know, the things, the parks, that everything would be come under that and would get done, because they would have a steer. You know exactly what you're doing, where you're working, and what you're there for. And I think that would be the biggest improvement in committees, you know, for the town council for a lot of years, because that was a good committee.
I think we'll see a lot of progress with that.
Okay, thank you, Tristan, please.
So two things. Well, I was just going to say about the ADP. Not that I want to dwell on the ADP, but you should keep bringing up the ADP. And I think you'd both being disparaging about it, and some of the comments you've made are not correct. One of which saying that you were a minority voice on it. You had exactly the same number of seats as Brecon did, as Norfolk County Council did.
Okay, stand corrected.
So that's disingenuous. So the people who aren't familiar with the ADP, because the ADP could have been really, and still can be, I think, a great success if it's given the opportunity. Just picking up on what you said, I think it's really valid. The neighbourhood plan costs over £100,000 of taxpayers' money, and you have said it hasn't really delivered anything. And I think people will be pretty upset over that 5 years on, all that money's been spent, and for whatever reason, nothing's really happened.
Okay, can I just clarify that, because it's an important point there, and I think people need to be clear about it. That £100,000 created a planning policy document. Yeah. Which needs to take into account by Brecon and developers. The planning policy documents.
It didn't have to be created at all, because some.
No, it didn't have to. No, but the council took a decision many moons ago with steering group and what have you, that the best way for Attleborough to try and influence how it grows, to try and have an input, rather than leaving up to the planning authority and developers. And a lot of towns and parishes throughout the country, which is why the Localism Act, in terms of giving community the voice to empower the community in 2011, was implemented for the community to influence what happens to where they live, what facilities they have. And the town council took that opportunity to say, well, developing a plan. That planning policy document is there, it was adopted and referenced. Is it being implemented? Probably not as well as it should do, if at all. The question with that is, it's a planning policy document. People who influence it are developers and the planning authority. We as a town council can jump up and down. And we've got big ticket item projects that we're trying to influence, but we don't have a seat on the table, which is why I'll come back to. It's not being implemented as well as it could do, because we do not have the powers. So when we say we spent £100,000 and it's a complete waste of time,
I didn't say that.
Okay, it's not working.
I did not say that.
It's okay, sorry, it's not working. No, it's not, because it was spent on that. I think it was money well spent. It was perhaps too much than what it should have been. Absolutely, I totally agree with that, and you know, the history of that. But the planning policy document sits there, and we're trying to implement it. What we're now discussing is what is the best vehicle to deliver that, as well as all the other wider policies and aspirations and local economy and everything else we would like to see happen. What's the best delivery mechanism? And I think what I'm suggesting and Phil's suggesting is the AMP committee, be it reformed, how you want to do it, whatever, is not the best delivery mechanism for the town council to try and influence. And no matter how you might rejig it or rebadge it, it's not. There's got to be a fundamental change. And I think professionally, I'm going to say that, put neck on the block, professionally, you need the key stakeholders to sign up to the same vision, the same objectives. And you get those around the table, you can do an awful lot.
But the key
At the
stakeholders,
moment, we haven't.
but the key stakeholders include Breckland and Norfolk County
And a lot
Council.
of other people, yes.
Yeah, but they include them and they're not signed up to it. So how is it going to be a success? Look, I want it to be a success. I want the town to grow. You've made a couple of comments earlier about the 7 pillars model. Well, I'm sure we're all signed up to the ideology of the 7 pillars, but it's how you get there. And you have to be pragmatic. You have to be realistic.
Absolutely.
And you have to get the low hanging fruit. And I feel that you're trying to do way too much, way too early. And it's a leap into the unknown because no one around here, I don't think, actually knows what they're about to vote.
Well, we need that discussion. So we're going to do one more round of tables. Then we are going to close this and have some kind of proposal, whatever that might be. Okay. Yes, Debbie.
I'm a bit confused now because you're saying that Breckland are on board for this 20-minute neighbourhood thing, and you are a councillor and you are a district councillor, and you're saying they're not on board.
Correct.
So is there been a breakdown in committee? Are they on board? You're saying they're not on board?
Officially, no, they're not on board. Have our discussions were seems a good idea, yes.
Right. So can I finish? Can I finish? So Breckland aren't on board yet. That's not saying they might. Yeah. What about Norfolk?
Okay, to clarify, what we're suggesting this evening is the AMP is not working as well as it should do, and going forward, I don't think it's the right vehicle. No matter how much you shape it up or change the chair or whatever, it's not the right vehicle. We need to do something different. Looking at what's out there, this to me seems to be the best vehicle of doing that, of encouraging people or having discussions around the table, key stakeholders saying,
I get all that.
Let me finish. The stages after this is then taking that principle of the town council wish to explore this, or we don't. And to explore that, you then have those discussions with the key stakeholders saying, how are we going to move out of before zones? Next 20, 30 years, what's the delivery mechanism? Brecon may well have an option, the county might. There might be other things out there. What we're saying is, we've got a model we would like to explore, and we think it ticks all the boxes for us as a community, as a town council, subject to town council approval. We want to discuss that with you. What does that look like? That's where we're at.
So to get it clear in my head from when it comes to full council, you're saying that the reasons for disbanding the AMP, yeah, I understand that. But your proposal for the 20-minute neighbourhood isn't actually a done deal yet. That doesn't exist yet. You're looking to try and encourage Breckland and Norfolk onto it. So you're looking at disbanding the AMP, but you're in your ideal world, you would like to go ahead with the 20-minute neighbourhood thing. But that's not a body that's already up and running. That
no,
we
it's
would,
not.
Right, I've got it now. I didn't understand that.
Yeah. The 20-minute neighbourhood does not exist.
Right.
It's not been approved. What we're suggesting is the current model, I don't think fit purpose. There is a different model. We would like to explore that. It does need discussion. It needs debate. It needs exploration. It needs better understanding. What does it actually
mean? So it's a theory.
What's it look like?
It's a theory.
It's a concept.
It's a concept that you'd like to
that we think this is the best delivery mechanism for Attleborough to influence and get what it wants.
But it's not actually already there. So
But it's not, because nothing's been approved.
So the concept of us not having a seat at the table for this it doesn't exist. So the seat that we're not going to have doesn't really exist yet because it doesn't exist.
We're not in that conversation yet. We don't know what that leadership body looks like.
Right. Okay.
Until we have
my apologies, I had to leave because we said it was a 2-hour meeting.
Yeah, sorry.
Did you ever, were you on the ADP?
No.
No, it was an extremely effective body. It was a great pity it was dissolved, with stakeholders from everything and Attleborough well represented.
Good.
The thing that got in the way was There's arguments between Breckland and Attleborough Town Council, which again is enough. But don't rubbish it, Ted, because it worked.
Okay.
And it needs, that same dynamic would have worked well. But if the time hadn't been spent on Breckland arguing, but if you look at what we got out of the ADP, we got all the traffic effects and all the alterations here. We got a lot of money through that, for influencing people being there, and we got a new school. I must go, sorry, because we've been too loud. Good night. Good night.
Take care.
Right.
Right, Tara, and then I'll
Okay.
bring it some.
So I know there's obviously the proposal that's on the agenda. I do in my mind have a different proposal, which I'm kind of going through the motions in my head. The first would be, I would recommend to the full council that the AMP committee is dissolved, because I think it's not working. I think we're all in agreement of that. I think the second point would be that an explanation is given at the full council meeting as to why, and a report made available. And I think the third would be, rather than to necessarily say, yep, we're gonna, in principle, go ahead with this 20-minute neighbourhood, I think it is at the full council meeting, look at the options, whether it's the 20-minute neighbourhood or the ADP, and look at what our options are, because this obviously isn't the only option that's available, and there has been other options that, do you know what I mean, have worked previously, and it might have been another one of those things where maybe the shortcoming with that was our fault. And obviously at the time we had very different management, because I know there was very strong voices at the table back then, and that was Gina and that was Tony Crouch, that hated the ADP, felt very strongly against it because they weren't in control, because there was this need for control and power and for ownership, like obviously having ownership of the linear park rather than community interest company. And I think actually the town council's greed at the time is what ruined that maybe for us. So maybe to actually look at what our options are, and then the town council decide that at the next meeting would probably be a maybe better explored approach.
Yeah, final thing. There's been a lot of talk about ideology 20 to 30 years into the future. But what, as an organisation, be it the town council, be it the ADP, the 20 minutes, the neighbour, all the different titles you could have. But what is stopping us from making improvements now? Because I'm certainly, as a resident of Attleborough, I would like to see some improvements now, not in 20, 30 years. I would love to think about things that can be improved now rather than thinking of the ideology of improvement. For those parents who've got young children, are they thinking about what it's going to be like in 20 years, or are they thinking about the green spaces now?
Okay, right, I'm going to close this down now, so I'm going to make a final comment and close it down. You're right, but it's not saying ignore the immediate, it's not saying ignore the near or the medium or the long term or the very long term. This is what planning is about. You break it up, but to deal with 20 years' time, you've got to start thinking about it now. You've got to start thinking, what are those challenges going to be? What are those 6-year-olds going to be grown into? Yes, what do the 12-year-olds need today? Absolutely. And this is where you're getting all these bits of the jigsaw, and you need that long-term vision. Why is it not happening now? And I'm open to have that discussion with Breckland about ADP or whatever you want to call it. There needs to be collaboration. There is no collaboration at the moment. And whoever's faulted it, I'm not casting aspersions on anyone. There is no collaboration at this moment in time today with Breckland, the county, the town council, the environment agency, the education, the NHS, you name it, all the bodies that can go on forever. There is no collaboration body going on. It's all done mutually exclusive through the planning process. It's not working. It's broken. And the reason I say that is, as part of the LEP, we set a group up called Building Growth. The sector, which recognised that the whole development process is broken if we want to deliver this great community aspirations we all desire. And you have to challenge things, and that's what we do. All we're asking tonight is we are challenging the status quo as to do things differently. The world has moved on. The world's moved on from the pandemic. people's aspirations have moved on. And we're challenging, we want to do something different. And if this creates that debate for that, then great, I'm for that. I'm open to ideas. But to carry on as we're doing is not an option in my mind. No. If the majority vote for that, then that's fine. And you can have a new chair. But it's not working. Right, we're going to do one round. Taylor, Tristan, Nicola.
No. Right. Do you want to go to Tristan and Nicola again?
Yep.
Because I'm happy.
Well, I was going to say that was a proposal.
Well, I was going to
I'll
reaffirm.
second
I was going to reaffirm my proposal, if that's okay. So what I was going to say was, so 4-part proposal.
Well, before you do, it's Nicola, do you want to say something before we get to proposals?
It's not that important. I just wanted to say that whatever you decide to do, all of the people that are currently volunteering in their small way in the little committees that contribute, I know they all want to have a voice and have a part to play. So whatever you decide to do, don't forget them, just the little people that comment and get involved, because actually that really helps, doesn't it? Only small things. I mean, it doesn't take that much time, not as much as you all give, but I think it's so important that everybody still has a role to play. And doing something fresh and exciting can be quite good, because I haven't been to one of these meetings before, but I know you have a lot to talk about and it gets very heated, but actually doing something quite exciting for us could be quite good, and rejuvenating it could be good, but that's for you.
I can guarantee that what we want to do is empower further, which is why one of the reasons the AMP I don't think is working. Empower further community groups to take charge, do projects, lead them, get them done. Absolutely. So whatever happens here, whatever happens to me, I'd like to think that the town council will fully subscribe to it.
Before I make a proposal, just on Nicola's comment, that is something that, especially with the Environment Committee, if that's set up, again, obviously the committees haven't been implemented as they should have been or could have been or anything like that. Do you mean there has been failing in the governance of it? But with an Environment Committee, all outdoor town council committees, except from any finance committees, can have non-council members on those committees. So when the Environment Committee, if it is set up, we can have non-councillors on it, we can have subcommittees of that, and we can set them up and follow it and do it textbook and do it right. And hopefully still have that engagement, because the engagement's supported, it's just the process so far has failed. And like I said earlier, that's not your fault, it's a structural problem with the committee so far. So back to the proposal, I'd like to propose that.
Well, actually, point of order, do we need this is a proposal that's on the table? We need to vote on that first of all, and then come back with an amended proposal. I'm asking for clarity.
You can get the amendments before the proposal.
Just check.
So the proposal that I would like to make is, please, that the AMP committee be dissolved, that the reasons for its failings be made into a report for the next full council meeting when this is given consideration, that an Environment Committee be set up, because I do think that's an important part of it. I've left that out previously. And that was the last bit to my last proposal, but
It was to full council look at the various options.
Yeah, so for the full council, for a report to be taken to the full council to explore the options for the new delivery method of the outgoing neighbourhood plan, because that could still be the 20-minute town, or it could be the ADB, but at least then we've explored the options and we can be confident in our decision making. And that's the proposal.
So,
I'm sorry.
well, I'll second
Going
it.
to second it.
I'll second that on the understanding that with regards to the review, there's a bit more detail on the review, because, who's going to undertake the review, who's going to be.
Well, I'm also
who's going to be
thinking about
spoken to,
this, and
etc.
actually, I appreciate that you'd like to second it. And I did think this earlier when I think Elizabeth seconded something, and obviously it's only us 5 that are voting
I
members.
was going to say, can we just illustrate who can vote at this stage?
You guys, we can ask you for your vote in principle, whether you would be for or against before we take our vote, which would be good practice. That is written into the terms of reference. But actually voting on making the decision itself, it's just us 5.
Oh, right.
Can I just query one thing?
What including Tristan?
No,
Yes, he's not an
not town councillor.
I'll second it then. I'm more than happy to second your.
But we
proposal.
can see these guys vote in principle if you want to say whether you'd support that motion or not.
I'd support it.
Yeah, and I would, Taylor. Yes, definitely. Different options need to be explored.
Yeah, I will.
Okay, and Vero, you seconding?
Yeah, second
Yeah,
it.
and then a show of hands.
I'm seconding in principle.
Who's doing the review before we say it's been approved? And you said next full council meeting, which is.
Well, you can do it as the chair, or Michelle can do it as the clerk.
By November.
It's got to be impartial.
Or you can do it at the December meeting. It's
Not
whenever.
got a lot of time, is there?
No, I'll take it to the December full council then.
Needs to be impartial.
Yeah.
How will they go around it?
Yeah.
That's going to be a difficult.
I think let's put this in kind of context. We're saying the AMP is not working.
Okay,
Well,
sorry,
let me-
the vote's actually been taken, so it's actually, you can't now go, oh, actually, I don't like the result of that, so we're gonna.
Sorry,
That's
clarity,
fine.
I've not said I don't like
Okay.
the result.
No, but I'm just saying the vote
All
has
I'm
been
going
taken.
through,
so
I'm
that
going
does
through, I'm
stand.
going through practicalities now and carrying that motion through. That's all.
That should be done before the motion's voted on, but okay.
Okay, well, let's see. So approved. Any further questions, members from the public?
Yeah,
Great,
great.
please, Nigel. Or do I need to stop standing orders to allow them?
Well, when we done it earlier, we didn't set it to a specific.
Very brief,
agenda
I
item,
promise
so
you.
I'd say so.
Going back to the last AMP, we break ground on phase one, latter part of next year. Bearing in mind the delays we are now encountering, discussing AMP, whatever happens in 20-minute neighbourhood, is that going to fit in your timescale for phase one?
The AMP's got no influence over the timescales.
No, so the 20-minute neighbourhood, I get the principle, love the idea, but that ain't going to go into phase one, is it?
The Homes England have already said that they're building the principles
They're building
around,
the principles.
around the TCPA's 20-minute neighbourhood.
But our timescales aren't affected.
Okay, so you've seen the principal ideas and how they're going to connect
Yes.
society to the
So
town.
they're building in the concepts and principles already there.
Fine. Cool.
Yes, Will.
Can I just quickly say, we moan about the youth, but can I say thank you to the youth that are cleaning up the recreation ground every night? So the groundsman had 2 pieces of litter to pick up the other day, and I do appreciate it, and well done.
Well done. No, thanks for your thing. Okay,